Welcome back to our deep dive into the American economy. Today, we are looking at why the United States is facing such high inflation in 2026, and we are going to look at the hard evidence and the research that explains this phenomenon first. We have to look at the data provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which shows a massive spike in the Consumer Price Index. And if we look at the research conducted by leading economists at Goldman Sachs, they point out that the primary driver in 2026 has been the delayed effect of global supply chain restructuring, which has made imported goods significantly more expensive than they were 5 years ago. Another major proof comes from the latest reports from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, where they have documented a massive increase in the velocity of money, which basically means that the massive stimulus of previous years is now hitting the market all at once and causing prices to skyrocket, because there are too many dollars chasing too few goods. We also have to consider the research by Dr. Jessica Haynes from the Economic Policy Institute, who published a widely cited paper this year, explaining that the housing market crisis in major cities like Austin and Miami has contributed to a 12% increase in the national inflation average, because shelter costs are a massive part of how inflation is measured. And then there is the energy sector research from the International Energy Agency, which proves that the transition to green energy in the USA, while necessary, has created a temporary supply gap where traditional fuel prices are high, but renewable infrastructure is not yet fully meeting the demand, which has driven up electricity costs for every single American household and business. If you look at the recent analysis by the Wall Street Journal, they highlight that the labor market is another huge factor because there is a shortage of over 5 million workers across various sectors, which forces companies to raise wages, and then they pass those costs on to you as the consumer through higher prices for food and services. We can also find proof in the quarterly earnings reports of major retail corporations like Walmart and Target, where they explicitly state that their logistics costs have increased by double digits in the last year, which is a direct reason for the price tags you see in stores today. Another expert view comes from the Brookings Institution, where researchers argue that the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Eastern Europe have caused a permanent shift in commodity prices, which is a major pillar of why the 2026 inflation feels so much more aggressive than previous cycles, because it is tied to global instability that the U.S. cannot control. Alone, this is supported by the data from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, which shows that trade tariffs and the decoupling from certain global markets have added an invisible tax on everyday items, making the cost of living rise faster than the average salary increase for most workers across the country. So when we combine the data from the Federal Reserve, the research from top-tier investment banks, and the academic papers from leading universities, we see a clear picture that the 2026 inflation is not just one thing, but a combination of high energy costs, labor shortages, and the long-term effects of fiscal policy all hitting at the same time. And this creates a cycle where everyone expects prices to go up, so they do go up. And this is what economists call an inflationary spiral, which is very hard to break without significant economic pain. So that is the reality of the situation in 2026, backed by the best research and proof available today. Thanks for listening to this analysis of the American economy.